Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Hi guys. Why Europe is insanely well designed. Preemptive like. OBF. Sure, I'll give it a first time in Europe that I do this.
Salzburg, Austria, one of the cutest towns you can definitely come to in Europe.
I did. Sorry about that. By the way, guys, a little tip. If you hold down Control and click a video or a link, it will open it in a new tab. Little tip for you. Okay, let's go. My name's Connor. I like to learn. Get ready to learn. Phones away, even if you're watching on one. Pause it.
This is
sorry. Original link to the video, top of the description, right below that link to the Discord. Click on it. Would love to have you. Don't be shy.
a map of Europe's mass transit railway system across 33 countries. The yellow lines indicate
there's a tunnel. That's got to be one of the longest tunnels in the world. There's no way that's a bridge. There's a tunnel between, what is it, like Helsinki and what's the capital of Estonia? Vilnius? I don't think so. I'm blanking, but there's a tunnel underneath the water thing that goes up to St. Petersburg.
the presence of a train line, and as you can see, it's very dense. There are hardly any spaces where there isn't any coverage for railways. Now, if we compare this to a map of railroad tracks in the US, it's a different story.
Sorry, what? This is a railway too? How is that possible?
Now, if we compare
from Stockholm or whatever this is in Sweden here to Estonia?
this to a map of railroad tracks in the US, it's a different story. While parts of the US have some good mass transit, there are large areas of the country which isn't covered by Amtrak, the nation's largest passenger railroad service. But let me show you another map, this time of high-speed rail in Europe. Now obviously, high-speed railways aren't going to be as common as regular speed railways, as they require excellent design, strict planning, and massive investment. And yet, as we can see, high-speed rail is present in Europe, which is a stark contrast to the US.
Question, I hear but I might have heard it from like a Chinese-funded channel or something, so I don't know if it's true. But I hear that China has like the best rail systems in the world. Am I wrong there? Or the best high speed? I could be wrong.
As you can see from this map, while the US does have some higher speed rail, like the Aquila line in the Northeastern Corridor, it's hardly an effective map of transport solutions.
There I am, guys, right there. You see that island right there? You can see my cursor, right? Like the tip of it's on it. That's Prudence Island, and I went there a million times when I was a kid. Also Block Island, Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket. I've actually never been to Nantucket. Beautiful state of Rhode Island, Narragansett Bay. Sorry, back to the video.
And the Aquila line isn't really that fast either. It can reach about 150 miles per hour, but averages less than 70. This is not the case for Europe's insanely well-designed railroad system. And you have to remember that Europe's system accomplishes this while spanning 33 different nations in a very diverse continent. And I know what you're probably thinking. This is just...
Is an average of 70 miles an hour not a fast average? That sounds pretty fast. Especially that, like, there's no traffic, obviously, on a train line. On a track.
Just because Europe is smaller than the United States, which simply isn't true. While the European Union is smaller than the US, continental Europe has an area that is about 1.04 times as much as the US. So we can dismiss this argument that the United States...
Does that include Russia? Well, so Russia west of the Urals is Europe, Russia east of the Urals is Asia?
can't be that well designed because it's too big. Europe simply is better designed. But if you're American, you might not understand why railroad tracks or public transport as a whole is so important. I mean, driving a car works fine, right? Well, no, and Europe showcases why a primary focus on private transportation is so detrimental to a well-functioning transit system. Look at these maps. They show the US road network versus the EU's, and as you can see, the EU's road network is not nearly as impressive as the US's. And
What's with this giant gap in France? Wow, the Benelux countries have got a lot of road networks.
yet, when you look at some of the most congested cities in the world, European countries don't feature particularly prominently in the global rankings. This is pretty shocking information because you'd assume that the country with a more expansive road network has a lot less congestion, especially considering the United States has devoted lots of time and money to their highways. So how come Europe is less congested when they have fewer roads? Well, it all comes down to disincentivizing the use of cars and, most importantly, making an attractive alternative. Europe does this by having both private and public transportation infrastructure, which technically the US has as well, it's just a lot worse. But on top of this, Europe makes it
New York subway is disgusting.
pretty expensive to buy, own, and
In a bad way.
use a car. This is achieved by having high taxes on vehicles and gas.
What did he say?
It's just a lot worse. But on top of this, Europe makes it pretty expensive to buy, own, and use a car. This is achieved by having high taxes on vehicles and gasoline. In fact, here's a map of worldwide gasoline prices. As you can see, European nations are in the top rankings, while the US lies at the bottom, charging very little. But let me be very clear, it's only a good idea to make it nice the bottom, charging very little. But let me be very clear, it's only a good idea to make it expensive to drive a car if you have an attractive alternative, which America doesn't, but Europe does. I mean, obviously this wouldn't work in the US with its current transportation infrastructure.
I have a point I want to make, but I'm not going to forget it, so I'm going to keep going the video.
But in Europe, this is a great strategy because you make the roads less congested for those who actually need them and give everyone else an affordable and efficient alternative.
The problem is, aren't you making the ability to buy your own car, which gives you a lot of personal freedom of travel that trains can't? What was I about to say?
Congested for those who
Guys, what was I about to say?
actually need them and give everyone.
Oh yeah. So the thing about this, and I've talked to Emperor of Rome, he's someone on Discord I've talked to a lot. About like American transportation infrastructure and how he thinks we should go more towards a European model. But my biggest kind of rebuttal is that you're making so he's mentioned a lot of the cons of car travel, right? The pro of car travel is freedom of movement for individuals, and it makes it so, yeah, there are a lot of pluses, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't go the European routes, but you're making it so that, like, individual car transportation is only for the very wealthy. And in the U.S., a big thing around cars is, like, freedom. You know, is your freedom to go across the country to anywhere you want. And trains just don't offer the same amount of flexibility in where you want to travel. So when it comes to strictly like logic in terms of inner city travel and not talking about like freedom to move other places in your car, then yeah, I see the point in that overall it allows better transportation, less congested. But there's a big thing around like American free, like car means freedom. Like you can get in your car and go wherever you want. And so I think that's a big difference.
Everyone else an affordable and efficient alternative, being Europe's amazing public transport like the trains on the railways. This is arguably the better strategy because even though the vast majority of Americans have access to vehicles at around 91% and gas is comparatively cheap, it still leaves 9% who don't have access to vehicles. What are these people who can't afford a car supposed to do? I mean, sometimes public transport to vehicle and gas is comparatively cheap, it still leaves 9% who don't have access to vehicles. What are these people who
I think that's a little unfair.
It still leaves 9%.
You're assuming that the 9% who don't own a car don't own one because they can't, where some might just choose not to, even though they have the finances to do so. I'm sure there is a big chunk in that 9% who can't afford it, but I think that's not the best stat.
Who don't have access to vehicles. What are these people who can't afford a car supposed to do? I mean, sometimes public transport isn't even an option or simply too expensive for many. So you've now actively excluded those who aren't exactly the most well off from society. To make matters worse, some US cities actually got rid of their public transport to make room for more cars.
The real problem was that once cars appeared on the road, they should drive on streetcar tracks. They could drive, and the streetcars could no longer operate efficiently. Why don't you just make a law that's saying cars can't drive on streetcar tracks? I mean, I'm sure you gotta cross the street somehow.
I'm not joking. American streetcars like trams were actually removed to make way
There were a good amount in Providence, Rhode Island. They were removed.
for bigger roads. Absolutely insane. Compare that to Oslo, Berlin, and Madrid, where discussions are underway to restrict or even exclude most cars from the city center. And let's not forget that when you have cars, you also need somewhere to park them. And this is where things start to become rather ridiculous. You see, the United States has 2 billion parking spaces for 250 million cars. That's 8 parking spaces per vehicle. In Europe, it's pretty much a 1-to-1 with around 250 million public parking spaces for 300 million cars. That's 8 parking spaces.
Are these public or public and private parking spaces? Because I think adding in private parking spaces is going to skew the statistics more. And, individual businesses aren't going to, like, some are going to want a bigger parking lot and whatnot. So if that's public parking spaces, then that makes sense.
Spaces per vehicle. In Europe, it's pretty much a 1-to-1 with around 250 million public parking spaces for 300 million cars.
Why does he include public parking spaces for Europe, but not for the US?
But to emphasize the ridiculousness of this even further, the area that the US
Did I miss that? Am I being stupid?
has 2 billion parking spaces.
Yeah, he didn't use public there. So I'm not sure, like, why would he compare total parking spaces to public parking spaces?
Vehicle. In Europe, it's 300 million cars. But to emphasize the ridiculousness of this even further, the area that the US dedicates for car parking is actually larger than the area dedicated for housing people. It's honestly unbelievable that people are being
What?
even further. The area that the US dedicates for car parking is actually larger than the area dedicated for housing people.
No way. I mean, I trust him. I'm saying no way and like a really, not like a he's wrong, no way. Really? Huh? See, is he talking? See, I think he's talking about public and private parking spaces. Like private parking spaces being like at a Walmart, right? Like a Walmart isn't a public parking space, or at any private business. So that's strange.
It's honestly unbelievable that people are being squeezed out of American cities
Close.
due to
I couldn't stand it if I had a neighbor that close. That's why I hated New York City. Not hate, but my biggest thing I didn't like about New York City is I like to be bare feet a lot. Like I like to go outside and like walk bare feet. I have hobbit feet, okay? I can show you if you want. They're not the most attractive feet, but they're very robust. And so I sometimes like walk to the beach like on, just with my bare feet. But like in New York, like you never have bare feet ever. You always have shoes on or socks in your, like maybe in your house, but outside it's shoes. And I that was a big one for me. 2 was the constant noise. And there's just so much people, and I'm a very introverted person, and New York is not the best place for that. I just put my sock on backwards.
regulators wanting to make more room for parking spaces. This simply wouldn't fly in the EU, as it has a whole policy dedicated to improving urban planning. See, the EU spent $115 billion policy dedicated to improving urban planning. See,
where is that? Is that in London? What side of the road are they driving on? No, they're driving on the
EU
right.
spent 115 billion euros between 2014 and 2020 to improve city design by making it smarter, greener, and more connected. Simply meaning they allocated funds to make their cities more efficient, more connected, and better for the environment. They allocated funds to make their cities more efficient, more connected, and better for the environment. And better for the environment they really are, as the average resident in a typical Western US city such as Los Angeles or Phoenix contributes approximately 6 times more carbon to the atmosphere per capita than an average European city resident. This is purely the result of not having effective transport solutions, which saves resources and allows people to move about efficiently. And exactly that, moving about efficiently, is something most of Europe's citizens are able to do as a result of the European Union. See, most of Europe's nations are in the European Union, which gives the EU citizens a number of perks, which includes a free travel area.
Question,
This has been
and this is important, because this will kind of solve my issue for like personal freedom. How much does it cost to rent a car? Like, what if you want to go on a road trip around Europe? You know, are you like, how can you do that? You can take a train and then walk, but like, how, if you want to drive through Europe, you have to rent a car if you don't own one, which is super expensive. But how much is renting a car? And I think there's a big mindset difference, whether it's better or worse, in that Americans see more cars as more freedom of movement and more public transportation as good for commuting, but in terms of leisure, you're very restricted to that, and a lot of Americans are like hardwired against that, I think.
one of the most important achievements of the EU, as it makes it possible for an EU citizen to travel freely to other EU member states and stay for up to 3 months. All they need is a passport or even just an ID card. No visas, no trips to embassies, no form filing, just head straight over. This makes it incredibly easy to travel, study, and work in other countries and communities, and having this level of centralization is very important to good design, as it gives the smartest people the opportunity to work where they are most useful. And since good design obviously requires a lot of complicated problem solving and planning, this is very smart. Another smart thing is the incredible biking infrastructure we see in Europe, perfectly illustrated by this map of bike path density in Europe.
Oh my god, Amsterdam was full of bikes. They were like, you ever notice like a bike rack in the US? It has like maybe like 6 bikes in it or something. In Amsterdam, like there were like 300 bikes in like a small parking lot area strictly for bike parking.
All the purple lines are bike paths, and there's clearly a lot of them, especially towards the left side of the map, but that's just because this is the home of the Dutch, the Netherlands. Now, the funny thing is, I won't be able to compare this to a map of bike path density in the United States, because such a map hasn't been made.
There's a cool map kind of like a quarter of the way around, maybe like a fifth of the way around Narragansett Bay, and I wish it continued all the way around.
At least I wasn't able to find any, and I can only wonder why. But anyway, what Europe and also the European Union has achieved is pretty remarkable, as it's hard to think of another set of such diverse countries where you would be able to travel so freely, in an efficient and inexpensive manner. I mean, you can literally get from Paris to Amsterdam, for example, in just 3 hours for around $30. Imagine being able to travel all over Asia without any border crossings, checks, or visas, and being able to stay for months at a time. That would be truly amazing. And let's not forget that European design has always been distinctive and very successful. In fact, the continent's history of design and interconnectedness serves as a model for the rest of the world. But even though Europe and the EU are pretty great and have amazing infrastructure, they obviously aren't perfect. And I'd love to hear some of the reasons it might not be, so leave a comment down below if you have some thoughts on this. But that's it for this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Thank you for making. Awesome video, guys. Love to see your comments or critiques, whatnot. Hope you're all doing well. If not, chin up. You'll be good soon. See you guys next time.